Olivia Hansen with some second-ray nations, some of them of great importance at this time, at least to themselves. Olivia.
So we have the second ray soul nations, those who have the energy of love, wisdom. And as Michael said, some of the countries who are leaders of the free world have these second ray soul energies, and yet they're in the midst of crisis. So we will be talking about a lot of interesting subjects as we go along. So, of the major nations, only Great Britain, the United States of America, and Brazil are definitely under the influence of the second ray of love wisdom, DK said. So Great Britain and the US have second ray souls, and Brazil has a second ray personality. Great Britain is the custodian of the wisdom aspect of the second ray. For the Aryan race, the United States will fulfill the same office for the world of the immediate future. And Brazil, many thousands of years later, will supersede both of them. So we're definitely including Brazil too. And here's our beautiful United Kingdom, the United States of America, and Brazil. DK says that Great Britain, the US, and Brazil embody the attractive, cohesive aspect of the second ray and will demonstrate it through wisdom and through right government. So government here is a really important factor. We'll be talking about that. And this is based on true idealism and love. And as I said, you know, both UK and the US, two of the leaders of the free world, are facing serious challenges right now. So we have charts of the makeup of these countries. And I'll go into the United Kingdom one and the US one when we focus more on them. But I do want to cover Brazil. So Brazil, fourth ray soul of harmony through conflict, second ray personality, astrological signs, Leo and Virgo. Its motto, and these mottos are really important because they give insight into the soul purpose, I hide the seed. And this is meaningful for the sixth root race to come. And then also, we have a large category in this particular group. We have Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And they have second ray souls, and we'll have a little bit more on them later. So, the United Kingdom. So we have here the breakdown, as we said, second ray soul. The UK has a first ray personality of will and power, as Tuya mentioned. Its ruling signs are Gemini and Taurus, and its motto is, I serve. London, the UK capital, and it's one of the 5 planetary centers, and it expresses ray 5 and 7, and astrological signs, Leo and Libra. So we see here also the 7th ray personality of ceremonial order and magic as expressed in London. We see a lot of that. DK says Great Britain represents the mind, expressing itself as intelligent government based on just and loving understanding. That is the ideal before her, but it's not something that she's living up to yet, and the motto, I serve. DK also says the ruling sign Gemini is from the standpoint of the soul of the people, and Taurus governs the material outer form of the nation. And of course, we see the seventh ray here. DK says it is the Gemini influence that has led to a constant movement and restlessness of the British people, which has led to a continual going out to the very ends of the world, of the earth. It is the Gemini influence which has produced, from the personality angle, the secret and often devious diplomacy which has distinguished Britain's political activity. And yet, the Gemini higher aspect does not yet entirely control, for the soul of Britain is struggling for expression. DK says, for long ages, Taurus has led the way with its material aims, its acquisitive desires, its arrogant will, and its blind moving forward towards the possession of that which it desired. He says, Great Britain regards herself as the preserver of the balance of power among the nations, and as the one to met out justice and indicate the right method of law and order. Yet Taurus frequently blinds her to the real issues. And of course, with Brexit, this has been seen most recently in the Brexit drama. And as we know, the majority of the British people voted in a somewhat uninformed way to leave the European Union. And then the government had 2 years to figure out the best way to do that. And many voters then, as they learned more, they realized the effect of Brexit and that it would be harmful to them and to the country. So many of them wanted to revoke it, and those in favor of Brexit couldn't figure out how to leave. So many of you may know or have participated in the vigils that the Moria Federation had to bring in light and try to invoke right action for the highest good, while Parliament and the Prime Minister were trying to figure out what to do. So that's been part of our spiritual effort to try to help. DK says the arrogance and self-will of the Taurus bull must give way to the fluid understanding of the inclusive Gemini consciousness. And this is the hard thing for British temperament to grasp. They are so sure of their righteousness and so convinced of their wisdom that they are apt to forget that good intentions are often offset by bad methods. The British are just and wise, he said, but their self-sufficient technique and their blindness to other people's point of view has not aided world peace and is indicative of the control of Taurus. It is Prime Minister Theresa May. You have an idea of her. She is the extreme example of this self-will, arrogance, and stubbornness of the Taurus bull, being so sure of her righteousness in her approach to Brexit, and really being blind to other people's point of view. She just simply refuses to compromise or collaborate to reach a winning solution. So there has been a huge dispiriting chaos in Parliament, as many of you know if you've been tuning in any way. The chaos has been really just affecting everyone there, all the many voices, the competing parties there. No one can agree on anything, including May's own party. So this has been going on for many, many months during this 2-year withdrawal period. And then this picture is really the people now rising up. And there is this is an estimate of at least 1 million people, and they say maybe even 2, who were marching peacefully through central London to demand a fresh referendum on Brexit. So no one has a consensus. The stalemate exists. UK citizens are very upset, and their diverse voices and views on what should be done just add to all this confusion. Many people didn't understand how Brexit would work, and now that they do, they're against it. So this was one of the biggest demonstrations in British history. And I have another picture. I'm so glad this one came up because this is our Alex Radcliffe. She is one of our coworkers who's been very active in the Revoke Brexit work, trying to bring in unity. And here she is during that march in front of 10 Downing Street with her sign. We stand for the integrity and unity of Europe. And she's watching this evening, even though it's very late in London. So, hello, Alex. Here we have a symbol of the bridge being raised and 2 sides. And so this is really a symbol of what's going on in Britain right now. The questions: shall Britain leave the EU and revoke Brexit, or revoke Brexit and stay? So those are the 2 extremes. And then, well, all right, how shall Britain leave? How shall it stay? It's really, really dividing the country. Everyone has their own ideas, with Theresa May stubbornly continuing to present the same old plan again and again. That's that Tara's stubbornness. She just keeps presenting the same old plan, which has been repeatedly voted down. So no consensus has been reached. The EU has given Britain until October 31st of this year to figure it out and come up with a plan. Finally, they say. So actually, this idea of withdrawal from collaborating with the European Union, rather than staying in it and helping to reform it and strengthen it, this may be just the opposite of Britain's sole purpose. DK says, England has been an exponent of the art of control with its Ray 1 personality, and her function has been to produce its first tentative grouping of federated nations that the world has seen, and to demonstrate the possibility of such a grouping. The U.S. is doing something similar with the U.S. states, fusing nationals instead of the subsidiary nations as the U.K. has done. And this is important because here is the symbol of unity, and the UK and US function in this way, bringing in unity. This is their part of their purpose, this wide objective in order to eventually give to the planet, to the world, a system of groupings within one national border or empire, and yet with an international implication, which will be symbolic of the coming new age technique of government. So really the US and the UK are pioneering ideas that can work for the future. And yet right now, unfortunately, both of them are a little distracted in doing this. In fact, a lot distracted. So it seems to me that Britain's sole purpose is to work with countries rather than go it alone. DK says, it will be apparent that the Shambhala force is working through the community of federated nations called the British Empire. And it is expressing the will to synthesis and the will to just and legal procedure. DK says for Britain, these energies indicate eminent possibilities of adjustment if love, which is the basic motivating power of the British soul, if love is permitted expression. DK says the question is, can Britain change and eliminate the Taurian aspects which have led her to blindly seek that which she desires, and because of her powerful first-rate personality to gain those ends? He says, the UK is the living nucleus of the British Commonwealth of Nations, where significantly a great experiment in free government is being tried out. It gives complete internal freedom and choice to each related dominion, plus an equally complete and free interrelationship. The dominions are all independent nations, but belong to the Commonwealth, the United Commonwealth. This pattern of government, DK says, is thereby presented to the world for consideration for the future. So that's a look at Great Britain, and you can see the great potential that she has to offer to the world. So, now on to the U.S. The United States of America was the center of old Atlantis, and hence inherited a psychic and ancient religious form, which was existent and potently alive in that part of the world for many centuries. It seems today that America and the world are being called upon to revisit the failures of Atlantis and put their collective house in order spiritually. So we'll look at the influences that are in the process of bringing to an end the adolescence of the United States, that it's in its adolescent stage, and the things that can enable it to come forth into a fuller maturity. So here we see the chart, and we'll look at this now in its fullness. Second ray, love, wisdom, soul. Sixth ray, personality of idealism and devotion. Ruling sign, Aquarius and Gemini. Motto, I light the way. Washington, D.C., the capital, and its signs are Cancer and Sagittarius. New York City, which is ray 2 and 3. And of course, New York is one of the 5 planetary centers, and also home to the United Nations, where the avatar of synthesis is said to overlight the General Assembly. And here we have the Statue of Liberty, welcoming immigrants, as the United States is a country made up of immigrants. So GK says the United States represents the intuitive faculty. Now he said Britain is the mind faculty, to kind of compare. And it expresses illumination, plus the power to fuse and blend. And its motto is, I light the way. DK says there's much closer relationship between Great Britain and the U.S. than between any continental nation, because both of them have second-ray souls, and Gemini is a ruling sign of both nations, so they have that similarity. The United States is ruled by Gemini at the personality level and by Aquarius as the ruler of its soul ray. DK says this combination is potent for future power and usefulness. And here we see this idea, many nationalities that are merging into one humanity. DK says U.S. is a fusing center where all nationalities are represented and being slowly blended into this idea of one humanity. He says a great experiment in right relationships is being undertaken and is making real progress, and I added, or has been. A culture and a civilization will emerge which will be the result of right human relations and can provide a world pattern in relationships. In the current stage of adolescence, the U.S. is plagued by problems of separativeness, persecution, and lack of opportunity in race relations, religious relations with blacks, Native Americans, immigrants. There's a divisiveness in red and blue states, rich versus poor, women's rights versus men, rural areas versus cities, as well as the factors of great materialism and uncontrolled desire and conflicting values and ideals. So these are some of the issues the U.S. is dealing with. DK says, there is nothing satisfactory yet in the presentation of dreamed of democracy. Great Britain and France are equally democratic and much more successful because they're more mature and experienced. But the melting pot of the USA will provide eventually the outstanding experiment in right human relations because of its many races and nationalities, all blended together within the borders of one country. DK says true democracy is as yet unknown, and it awaits the time when an educated and enlightened public will bring it to power. So an educated and enlightened public. If the idealism of the United States can be illuminated by the second ray of soul wisdom and not by the personality expression, then the United States can be seen in the light instead of the many separative national lines. At present, it is the sixth ray, personality ray of the United States, which controls. The capital city, Washington, D.C., is ruled by Cancer and Sagittarius. And DK says it is this fact which leads the United States to act like Cancer the crab and be preoccupied with its own house, which it carries on its back, and to vanish into hiding at the first sign of trouble. Okay? And this is exemplified today by President Donald Trump and his Make America Great Again campaign. And it also implies, and forget about the rest of the world and its well-being. We see this under Trump's presidency, with him pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Change Treaty, questioning the value of NATO, breaking trade agreements with other countries. Make America Great Again is the opposite of the U.S. spiritual calling. The U.S. government, one of the leaders of the free world today under Trump, has reverted to a self-centered adolescent, reactive, unstable, and unpredictable. Trump's dishonesty, manipulation, and self-dealing have been documented by the Mueller report, and Trump may face charges when he leaves the presidency. Robert Mueller said he could not indict Trump as a sitting president because of Justice Department rules, and he was empowered under the Justice Department. But he listed Trump's many wrongdoings in detail. Mueller also verified that Russia did interfere in the U.S. presidential elections, as it placed large-scale damaging lies in social media, hacked emails, and other things, which benefited Trump over Hillary Clinton. Members of Trump's Republican Party in government refuse to challenge Trump. The Washington Post has documented that Trump has told over 10,000 lies as of April 28th, and we don't know what it is now since we've all been here at the conference, but 10,000 lies relating to government and other things. So this is unheard of, and much of the country is just appalled, and working to bring in change. With Trump as president, we see the U.S. has far to go, but his outrageous disregard for honesty, morality, and good government may evoke a fervent return to values and treading the higher path, which will help the U.S. better manifest its unrealized motto, I light the way. And here we see President Lincoln's word on his monument, with malice towards none, with charity to all. And DK says he is a racial avatar. DK says the U.S. Gemini nature and its Aquarian soul should, when developed and balanced, provide a most remarkable channel for human expression. With a lighted soul-infused idealism, we will see rapid response of America to the needs of others, to compassion for all suffering, and to a pronounced progress towards real humanitarianism. So, with malice towards none, with charity to all. DK says some people may call this the democratic ideal, but in truth, it's something which grows out of and eventually supersedes democracy. And this is important. It is the ideal of a spiritual government, a government by the highest and most spiritual people to be found in the land. The United Nations is headquartered in the U.S. in New York City, as we said, where it is said the avatar of synthesis overlights the General Assembly. I love this picture, too, because with the lights from above, you just can kind of, it's a beautiful picture to imagine that happening. And New York, with its rays 2 and 3, again, one of the 5 major planetary centers. You know, when the Christ, who is the living embodiment of Ray 2, love, wisdom, when he reappears in the future someday and establishes a center of spiritual activity, it may likely be in a second-rate country because of soul rays. And so if the U.S. can live up to its spiritual motto of I light the way and express its second-ray soul energy, it may become a worthy candidate for this possibility. So, of course, that is the hope. However, former Vice President Joe Biden, now a candidate for U.S. President, says what many people feel right now, that the U.S. is in a battle for the soul of its nation. Biden said this in 2017 after the hate attacks in Charlottesville, which President Trump wouldn't condemn when racists and white supremacists were doing hateful things in that protest. And now, in 2019, Biden is saying it again. So I want you to see this very brief video, not for political reasons at all. Biden is not my candidate, it's not that. But it highlights the problem of the U.S. And you see a strong ray example of idealism seeking to evoke the soul. So look at this as an expression of sixth ray idealism here.
I wrote at the time that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. Well, that's even more true today. We are in the battle for the soul of this nation. I believe history will look back on 4 years of this president and all he embraces as an aberrant moment in time. But if we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation, who we are. And I cannot stand by and watch that happen. The core values of this nation, our standing in the world, our very democracy, everything that has made America, America is at stake. Folks, America's an idea that's stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It gives hope to the most desperate people on earth. It guarantees that everyone is treated with dignity and gives hate no safe harbor. It instills in every person in this country the belief that no matter where you start in life, there's nothing you can't achieve if you work at it. That's what we believe. And above all else, that's what's at stake in this election. We can't forget what happened in Charlottesville. Even more important, we have to remember who we are. This is America.
Yeah, so do you really sense that sixth ray of idealism being called in to fight for the second ray soul of America? Yeah. So and this, of course, has nothing to do with his presidential campaign announcement, because Biden is one of 21 people who have now announced that they're running for the United States presidency. I don't know how big a stage they're going to have with that many people, or how they're going to do the debates, but it's a lot of them. So my thought is, may the U.S. soul be the victor. Anyway, I want to look quickly at 3 smaller countries who have second-ray soul. Canada, second-ray soul, seventh-ray personality, ruling sign Taurus and Libra. Australia, second-ray soul, ruling signs Virgo and Capricorn. And New Zealand, second-ray soul, ruling sign Gemini and Virgo. So I really don't have time to focus on these countries. We'll save that for another time. But there was something so remarkable. I just really wanted to share this with you. And this is Prime Minister, New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. She is such a wonderful example of soul response after the mass killing of 50 people in Christchurch, New Zealand. You know, New Zealand had never before experienced any kind of an attack like that. Now, as opposed to the U.S., we've had a lot. But the way that Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern handled it was just so amazing. Such a wonderful expression of that second ray soul. So she described the events as our darkest of days. And she said, "We are determined to not let anyone divide us." And then she visited grieving Muslim families and wore a hijab. Am I pronouncing that right? Anyway, you can see what that is. I think it's a hijab. Okay. And she did this as a sign of respect, and she told them, "You are us." She pledged to cover the funeral costs of all 50 victims and offered financial assistance to the families. She also enacted gun control laws, unlike in the U.S., which we've been blocked because of the control of the gun lobby. President Trump, by comparison, never came close to responding in this high-minded way, although many U.S. citizens have. So this is a wonderful example of New Zealand's leader and its people expressing the soul ray of this second-ray country and setting a beautiful example to all. So DK says, and I want to mention this because, you know, we're really talking about the shadow side of some of these countries, and there's much good. But DK points out, in every country, without exception, there are the good and bad elements. There are progressive and reactionary groups who are cruel. There are cruel and ambitious people who would gladly exploit the world for their gain. There is persecution of minorities and ignorant and arrogant nationalism and separativeness, and selfishness and materialism. And there is good. So let's keep this in mind as we look at the various countries, and also remember they are all in process of soul infusion. They're not there yet, but the soul of the countries will eventually come forth and shine. So the other thing I think is important to note is that what is going on in these times, the potent energies of these times, are bringing to light the darkness, bringing that to the surface so that it can be faced and transformed. Yeah. So that's a look at the countries. I don't know if we have any time for comment. Do we have any time, Michael?
Well, we have 40 minutes that have elapsed, but if anybody wants to.
Okay. And again, what I would say is let's keep our comments thoughtful. Let's remain with our poise and look at this from a higher perspective of the soul. Okay, so Philip.
Now it is, I think. Yeah. DK never gives the rays per se for Canada, Australia and New Zealand, but it is quite possible that they are second-ray souls as members of the original British Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. So, the New Zealand has expressed very strong second ray. Mm-hmm. It has 2 second ray signs, Gemini and Virgo, mm-hmm. as soul and personality. Mm-hmm. So just to mention that, he never actually allocated the rays, but for instance, some New Zealand students posit the first ray as the soul ray of New Zealand, and various combinations for Australia and Canada too, no doubt.
Yeah, we put them in our category as likely, but it's good that you clarified that it wasn't definitely said by DK. So thank you, Philip. Okay, any other thoughts before we move on?
Olivia, I want to ask a question. Yeah. When the United States will turn to the second rate, can you estimate the time?
Well, we all want that.
Foresee.
I think your question was when will the United States return to the second ray? Is that what you said? Well, if we had a crystal ball, we'd love to know ourselves. What I can say is that there are so many people, and so many of them are so outraged with what has gone on that that they are working for change. The problem is, and it's almost like with England and Brexit, everybody has their own idea. There is an organization called Indivisible, and it was formed out of people in Washington, D.C. that kind of knew what was effective to do. And this organization is really working to bring everyone together. And one of the things that they are doing is asking all candidates, and there was 20 when I started, and Michael Bennett from Colorado has declared, so now there's 21. They're asking all candidates, run your strong campaign for the nomination, but sign this pledge that whoever becomes the Democratic candidate, you will get behind this candidate, work for them, stop the backbiting and all the things that can separate and divide and provide an opportunity for the current president to win re-election. So those are the things. If we can bring unity among the candidates and have them all work together, then whoever does receive the nomination truly can represent the will of the majority of this country. So that would be our hope, but we don't know exactly when. We don't have a crystal ball, but thank you for that good question.
Thank you, Olivia, for your talk. I just think that the fact that in 2020, shortly after the election, there will be that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius on the winter solstice, Aquarius being the soul ray ruler for the United States, and Jupiter being the planetary, the planet of the second ray, again supporting the soul of the nation, I think bodes well for a change in the tide of events as we approach 2020. So, thank you.
Yeah, good, Kathy, and we certainly hope so. Yeah. Okay, so we have any more questions? And I want to be mindful we have other countries and presenters, but yes, Martha.
Thank you for both speakers for the Ray 1 and the Ray 2 descriptions. Probably it's important for all of us to remember the outcomes is up to us. That when we ask the question, well, when is this going to take place? A lot of it has to do with our ability to gather the collective consciousness and the intensity to make the difference. Thank you for the indicating some of the elements that we can look toward. I would say that in Great Britain and in the United States, those who have been very marginalized and disqualified are finding their voices. And that it's always a good sign in terms of foment when those who have been oppressed actually are developing the strategies that make the difference. For
Right.
example, First Nations people in the United States have created some of the smartest lawyers to work on their issues. So that it's a gathering of a kind of energy, and I would say at this time focus is extremely important.
It is, and that we work together. And the fact is that there is this freedom, it's a relative freedom, but there is freedom in both of these countries. And when we had the earlier focus that Tuya did on first-ray countries, we think about what's going on in China, and there is such totalitarianism that they're moving to, and all the cameras in which citizens are being recorded, and there is a new standard of behavior, and if you don't follow that, your children can't go to school, you can't travel, you can't. So this restrictedness of the first ray coming in that way to restrict the people versus countries that do have so-called freedom, and yet in the United States, so many don't vote, and this idea of working together and bringing in this inclusive second ray is really the secret to the success for both of these countries.